Recently, me and my friend Bailey were having a conversation about language connection. He is an investigator here at the university in town, and obviously, I'm in education. So the things that we kind of talk about, the language that we use, the vocabulary that we use, is a lot different. But I wanted to talk to him about an article that we recently read, and so I'm going to talk about those things and kind of what our conversation was about. I'm not going to use as much of the educational jargon as we might usually use. In normal presentations between teachers, I'm not going to use different trendy terms that we might use. Just so whenever he reads this and he sees this, it can actually be something that he understands. It's just kind of a summary or review of what we talked about. So today, I really want to talk about improving language connection. The first thing I need to talk about is, what do I face every day? I am currently in a physical science classroom at the high school level. I am a co-teacher in that classroom, and I see students from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different exceptionalities. Some with language difficulties. Some of them have speech impairments, while others just have a tough time, connecting with written language. Today, I want to really focus on the students that have a tough time connecting with written language, and kind of how what we do currently, some research that has just been reviewed, and things that I learned from that I can kind of implement, and some things that parents and teachers in other classrooms hopefully can implement from the research that we just read. Most importantly, I want to just outline that connection is not easy. Um, the kind of way I explained it to him is, a picture that you're reading a recipe for a soup that you really want. You can identify all the words in the recipe, but you can't figure out the sequence in which to add the ingredients. There's no numbering system that's clearly outlined. It just uses wording, but the words you don't quite understand. What I was telling him is, you're not going to be very successful making that soup if you don't know the sequence in which to put those ingredients in. Even though you know all the ingredients, you know all the words, you're not really sure how they kind of mesh together and connect. A lot of students in my classroom feel this way when they encounter educational text. They can read the text, they can read the words for the most part that are actually on the page or on the screen, but they have a tough time connecting and applying that and answering those application questions. But we're not stuck. Something that I ask myself is, what can I do to improve? And thankfully, this week, we were asked to read a research article from the University of Cincinnati that pertains to language connection, and I just want to kind of go through what we learned from that article. First things first, the researchers, they went out and did research based on expository language. They stated that expository language is difficult for students to connect with due to lack of exposure. So most books that we read at a young age are narrative, not expository, and a lot of their research was in younger age, preschool, kindergarten, early elementary age. So not the age that I currently teach, but I think what they found is very applicable to what I do, because as you progress through school, expository texts become a lot more apparent, especially in classes like mine. The researchers focused on teaching the use of sequencing words in text to improve the student's ability to connect and understand the text. Those sequencing words are words like first, then, next, those types of things. They instructed the teachers in the research group to use educational picture books. We'll talk about kind of one of the specific ones that stood out to me as a science teacher. To ask questions throughout, provide continued support, just continue to just point students and ask questions to students in the direction to really understand sequencing and understand the vocabulary behind it. So, what did they find? One of the texts they used, like I said, that really stuck out to me, pertained to plant growth and parts of a plant. Me being a science teacher, those things are things that I talk about in my classroom. Students really seem to connect with this text after the implementation of teaching sequencing. The teachers were very intentional about speaking about sequencing adverbs, those adverbs we just talked about, first, then, next, those things. Um, the students' vocabulary improved because they continued to ask questions about it. Hey, what is this? part of the plant? How does this connect to this? And it really helped those students make a deeper connection with science concepts. And so not only did we see an improvement in sequencing identification, but also just vocabulary and the deeper connection. And the big thing that stuck out to me that I told Bailey is when the focus shifted from simply reading words on a page to understanding how the words connect to each other, students their skills really improved. And I think that's something that we really need to think about as educators, and not just teaching them how to read and what words are, but how do the words connect with each other. So I have two recommendations for educators and then two recommendations for parents. The two recommendations that him and I kind of talked about for educators were the first one is to clearly teach sequencing. We can't expect students to understand sequencing when things are happening, what are the next steps, if we don't explicitly teach them. Obviously, students in my classroom know what the words first, next, and finally mean. But I think at a younger age, to my younger educators out there, the ones that teach younger children, these words really need to be identified whenever we're reading them throughout a passage, whether that's highlighting, circling, whatever it might be. Those words need to stand out to our students. Another thing that I've seen in my class that has really helped is the use of visual aids and organizers. A lot of my students are those visual learners. They want to see it out. I am this way. I'm a very visual person. I like to draw arrows. I like to, doodle in the margins and draw pictures and different things like that, just to kind of give myself ideas of what I'm reading. And a lot of my students benefit from that as well. Not all, but a lot of them do. The use of step-by-step organizers would be something that's very beneficial if we're teaching sequencing. Overall, just allow students to see things and make those connections. So much of their lives are visual and online and all of these things. Like, we really need to meet our students where they're at. Then my two recommendations to parents that my friend Bailey and I talked about, just because he asked, what can parents do at home? And I think that's a great question. The first thing, as I said, is just be intentional about sequencing. Some things, in our lives just naturally have a sequence. Go back to the recipe example from the beginning. I think students or children would really, succeed and improve if they saw how sequencing was a part of our real life. Um, I think that they would understand like the importance of knowing what happens when, if they saw how it relates to life. So I just said something as simple as cooking. If you're cooking with your child, ask them questions like, what should we do next? What comes next? And just really kind of improve the sequencing of things, and them understanding the importance of that. The second thing is to read expository books at home. I think so often students connect expository text or these educational texts to school. And so what that leads to is school is not a place that's super exciting for them, for a lot of our students. So when we just give them these texts at a not exciting place, their connection with the text is negative. Therefore, there's not a lot of a want to or desire to learn and to connect with these texts. So I think a big thing that our parents can do at home is to expose the students to educational texts while they're at home. It's a safe place. It's a place they want to be. It's a place they feel comfortable, but give them the opportunity to see these same sort of texts in order for them to get more comfortable with them. And the parents can just ask questions throughout reading. I'm a big on confidence. Students want to be confident. They need to be confident. And I think our parents can do a great job of boosting their confidence and boosting their understanding by asking questions. And it doesn't have to necessarily be books. It could be something that you guys are just talking about, or something that's happening on TV or anything like that. Just asking questions, leading questions to further deepen the understanding of making connections to the real world and to things that are applicable to their life. Thank you.